My name's Hugo Lawson. I'm 62 years old and I spent 30 years in the army. I've got tattoos from places you probably don't care about and a lot of medals no one wants to hear about. But that's the past. Right now, I'm just trying to figure out how to live in a world where you don't get orders, where you have to decide everything for yourself, from what to eat for dinner to how to get through the day without feeling like you're not doing enough. I spent decades in uniform, protecting, leading, fighting. Now I can't even get my wife to look me in the eye. The damn world feels like it's moved on without me. Deanna, she's my wife, or at least she used to be. We've been married for 25 years. Things were fine for a long time. Hell, we made a life together, built a house, had a few good years. Then I left, went off to serve, and somewhere along the way she started to slip away from me. It wasn't one big thing. It was the little things, like how she'd get this distant look when I'd come home, like I wasn't the same man who left. I couldn't blame her. I'd changed too. Army life does that to you. Long hours, constant pressure. But this wasn't just a problem with me. It was her. I didn't figure out the full picture until it hit me one night. I was sitting in the kitchen, minding my own business, when I noticed her phone sitting on the table, something she never does. I don't pay much attention to her stuff, but that night I found myself staring at it. Just lying there, face up, buzzing. I heard her footsteps coming down the hall, so I didn't touch it. But I saw the name on the screen, Marcus. I didn't need to know much about her work to know who that was. Marcus was a client, one of those important clients she always took business trips for. Trips that lasted longer than they should have. I didn't say anything right away. I didn't have to. Micah told me everything I needed to know. But I wasn't about to let this slide. So, I took action the way I'd been trained, planned, calculated. That's how I was going to catch her. No emotions, no shouting matches, just cold, hard facts. I'd learned over the years that control, timing, and discipline were the only things that mattered. Deanna didn't get it. Not yet. I knew I had to move carefully. No wild accusations. I couldn't give her a chance to cover up. No, I'd have to create a situation where she'd have to explain herself and I'd be the one in control. So, I started small. Tom, the neighbor across the street, a widower who always kept to himself and spent his days messing around in his garden, saw me a lot. We had some conversations, but mostly I just nodded at him when I passed by. He always tried to give me advice, most of it about gardening, some about life. I wasn't in the mood for his wisdom, but he was there, in his old worn-out jeans and faded boots, always ready to offer a hand or a kind word. "You good, Hugo?" he asked one evening, catching me as I pulled my car into the driveway. I didn't have time for long talks. "Yeah, just fine. How about you?" I'm good. Just keeping busy. You ever think about going back to the vets group?" "They're all asking about you," Tom said, shifting his weight, tapping his garden shovel on the ground. "They could use someone like you." I didn't answer right away. There was too much on my mind. The group? I'd been a part of it, sure, but that was before all this. Before everything started going wrong. But as I looked at Tom, I realized something. The veterans group wasn't just a bunch of old men talking about war. They were survivors like me. Maybe I could use their support now. They wouldn't ask any questions. "Maybe," I said, keeping it short. "I'll think about it." That was enough for him. Tom gave me a small nod and walked back to his garden. He didn't push. Deanna didn't notice at first. She was too busy with whatever was going on with Marcus. It didn't matter. I was already 2 steps ahead. Every evening after work, I'd watch her closely, see where she was going, what she was doing. I kept a mental log, no notes, just facts. The woman thought she could keep her secrets from me. She couldn't. One afternoon, as I was sitting on the porch, I saw her pull out of the driveway in the car, the same model she always took when she was headed out to meet him. That's when I knew I had to make my move. I had a plan, and I wasn't going to let her slip out without facing the consequences. I made a call to Mark, the taxi dispatcher from the corner shop who knew all the routes around town. He wasn't interested in anyone's personal life, but he knew the schedules. "Hey Mark," I said, my voice steady. "I need a favor. Can you tell me where Deanna's been headed these days?" There was a short pause before he spoke. "I've been routing her a lot lately. She's been going out to the west side. I think she's meeting someone. Don't know who, but I know the address. It's off Highway 7. That was it." I hung up without another word. I'd found what I needed. Time to put the plan in motion. Deanna wouldn't know it yet, but the game was already over. She thought she was in control, but I had a few things to show her that would knock her off that pedestal. I kept my eye on the clock. I knew her routine better than she did. The next few days passed with the same rhythm. She'd get up early, get dressed in one of those fancy outfits for work, and head out, always with the same practiced ease. It was almost like she wasn't even hiding it anymore. I could see it in the way she moved, in the little things she thought I wouldn't notice. But I was watching, and I was taking notes in my head. The mornings were quiet. No more small talk between us. She'd ask me something about the house, about the yard, but I didn't engage. I wasn't interested in pretending like everything was fine. My mind was elsewhere, focused on what I needed to do. When she left that morning, I didn't follow her. Not yet. That night, though, I was ready. I took a deep breath, grabbed the keys, and headed out to the west side. The road was quiet, empty, just how I liked it when I needed to think. I parked a few blocks away from the address Mark had given me, just far enough that I could watch without being seen. I wasn't about to make this easy for her. I sat in the truck for a while, just thinking, trying to stay calm. The adrenaline didn't kick in yet. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was just methodical, the way I'd been trained. I watched the clock on the dashboard tick by slowly, and then, finally, I saw her. She walked up to the door, her head down, like she didn't want anyone to see her. I knew then it was him. No mistake about it. I didn't move. I didn't make a sound. Just sat there in the dark, watching. That's when she kissed him. I didn't hear it, but I saw it, clear as day. I didn't flinch, didn't feel anything other than the cold certainty that this was the moment. She'd betrayed me, but I'd let her have her time. Now it was my turn. I waited another minute, then fired up the truck and drove off. I had what I needed. The rest would come soon enough. The next day I didn't say a word. Just like before, she went off to work, acting like nothing had happened. But I had plans. I wasn't about to confront her, not yet. I didn't want to give her the chance to talk her way out of this. I went into her office and started moving things around, making sure she'd notice. Her little trinkets, the things she cared about, I started hiding them. Nothing big. Just her favorite pen, the picture frame from our anniversary. Little things, the things that made her feel like she had control. I wanted her to start feeling that same unease, that same vulnerability. I kept myself busy with small tasks around the house. Noticed how quiet everything had become. The silence between us was deafening. When she came home that evening, she didn't say anything about the missing items. She didn't need to, but I could see the tension in her face when she came through the door, like she knew something was off but wasn't sure what. That was the start. Just a little shift in the balance. I didn't push her yet. I wanted to let the pressure build. A few days later, I found myself sitting down with Tom again. He was out in his garden, like usual, poking around with a trowel. I figured I could use a distraction, something to keep my head straight. "You been doing all right, Hugo?" Tom asked, his voice low. "Yeah, just fine," I said, leaning on the fence. "You know how it is. Same old, same old. You ever think about what's next? After all this?" Well, after everything's done, I wasn't sure how to answer him. Tom had his own way of asking questions without really asking them. But I could feel the weight of his words, the way they cut through the surface. "Yeah," I said. "I've thought about it." He gave a slow nod, not pushing any further. That's how Tom was. He always knew when to keep quiet. That night I made another call, this time to Mark. I needed confirmation. "Mark," I said, my voice steady, "I need you to tell me where Deanna's been again, and this time be real clear." "Yeah, I can do that," Mark answered, his voice a bit flat. He didn't care about my personal business, but he knew what I was asking. "She's been going to the same place, Hugo. Same address. You sure you want to know?" I didn't answer right away. I already knew what I needed to. "Yeah, I'm sure." The rest was just a formality. I didn't need to waste time talking about it. I knew the route, knew the address. She'd been playing me for months, and now I had her. I wasn't going to let her slip away. Not this time. It was time to make the next move. But I wouldn't rush it. I was playing the long game, and I knew exactly how this was going to end. Deanna wouldn't see it coming. I waited a few more days before making my next move. The tension between Deanna and me was thick, but she didn't seem to notice. She'd go about her business, talking in that corporate way of hers, always avoiding anything real, anything personal. That's how she had been for a while now, keeping her distance, hiding behind work and meetings. She didn't think I could see it. But I did. And I wasn't about to let her control the narrative. I started taking things one step further. I didn't just hide her things anymore. I started to play with her mind. I'd move small objects, her favorite coffee mug, a book she'd been reading, a scarf she liked to wear on chilly mornings, just enough to make her question whether she was losing it. I'd leave little notes, reminders of things she'd forgotten, things she never mentioned to me. It was subtle at first. Small shifts in her world. I'd see her come home, glance at the spot where she'd left her phone or the table where she kept her keys, and I'd watch her face. I could see the wheels turning in her head. She didn't want to admit it, but I knew she was starting to doubt herself. One evening, she was in the kitchen, trying to cook something for dinner. She was always busy, always trying to keep up the illusion that everything was normal. I could hear the clinking of pots and pans from the other room, but I wasn't interested in the meal. I was watching her, paying attention to how she moved. How she avoided eye contact when she knew I was looking at her. I leaned back in the chair, just listening, when she finally broke the silence. "Did you take my charger?" she asked, her voice tight. I didn't look up from my paper. "Nope," I said flatly. "Must have misplaced it." She didn't push it, just muttered under her breath and went back to what she was doing. But I could tell she was bothered. The uncertainty was there, just beneath the surface. The next day, I drove by the address Mark had given me again. This time, I didn't park too far. I parked across the street, just out of sight. I'd been doing this for a while now, watching her meet him. I didn't want to be caught, but I needed to see it. I couldn't let this go without getting the full picture. When she showed up, I watched from the truck, my hands gripping the wheel. She had that same look on her face, the one that told me she was losing control, that she thought she was getting away with it. I stayed parked for a while, just observing. It wasn't just her. He came out to meet her. Marcus. The guy she'd been sneaking around with. They exchanged a few words I couldn't hear, but the body language was enough. They were comfortable with each other. Too comfortable. He touched her shoulder, leaned in close, and she didn't pull away. That was all I needed to see. I pulled away quietly, making sure to keep my distance. I wasn't ready to confront her, not yet. But the pieces were falling into place. I knew what I had to do next. The following night, after Deanna had gone to bed, I pulled out the printer from the spare room. I wasn't going to play games anymore. I had to make sure she understood there would be consequences, real consequences. I printed out a few flyers, nothing too fancy, just the facts. The affair. The proof I'd gathered. I didn't just want to confront her, I wanted to make sure everyone knew. She wasn't going to hide behind her polished smile anymore. Her little world of control was about to come crashing down. The next morning, I made sure to act like nothing was different. Deanna was still oblivious, going through her routine. She didn't notice the change in me, the calm in my movements. The plan was already set in motion. I got in the truck and drove straight to her office, waiting for the right moment. I wasn't interested in subtlety anymore. I was done with games. This wasn't about saving her anymore. It was about making sure the truth came out, no matter how messy it got. When I got to the building, I took a deep breath, made sure my face stayed neutral, and started posting the flyers. I knew it would cause a stir, but that was the point. I wasn't just taking back control. I was forcing the issue, making her confront what she'd done. I didn't stick around to watch the fallout. That wasn't the point. I just knew the moment was coming. She'd find out soon enough. And when she did, I'd be ready for it. I didn't expect her to come home and act like nothing had happened. But she did. She walked in the door, tossed her keys on the table, and started going through her usual motions. It was like she didn't even notice the storm coming. I didn't let her get comfortable. "You might want to take a look at something," I said, calm as can be. She didn't ask what it was. She just walked over to the table where I'd laid out a flyer. Her eyes flicked down, then back to me. "What is this?" she asked, voice shaking. "Your life," I said. "Your lies. Your affair. Take your pick." She didn't have an answer. At least not one that mattered. She stood there for a moment, staring at the flyer, the color draining from her face. She looked up at me, her lips pressed into a thin line. She didn't say anything at first, and that was exactly what I wanted. Silence. It was the only thing left between us now. I waited, not rushing her, letting the weight of what she was seeing sink in. I didn't have to raise my voice, didn't have to push her. I'd already done my part. Now it was her turn to face it. She finally spoke, but her voice was weak. "This is ridiculous. Who would?" "You already know who." I cut her off. "Don't play dumb, Deanna. I've been watching. I've been listening. I know everything." Her eyes darted from the flyer back to me, like she was trying to find a way out. But there was no way out. She wasn't going to talk her way out of this one. I could see her trying to figure out her next move, but the shock was still too fresh. I stood there, watching her, letting the moment stretch. There was no need to rush it. She took a step back, shaking her head. I can explain. You can explain? I repeated, the words coming out flat. There's nothing to explain. It's all right here. She hesitated, then looked at the door, like she might bolt. She probably would've if she thought it would work. But she didn't. She stayed put. It's not what you think. Don't try that, I said, stepping a little closer. I've seen you. I followed you. I know where you've been. You've been lying to me and you've been lying to yourself. I'm done with this game. Her face twisted in anger, but it wasn't the kind of anger that was aimed at me. It was the anger of someone who had been caught, exposed. You never understood me, she spat, her words sharp. You were always too busy, always focused on your damn career. You think this is easy for me? You think I wanted this? I didn't have a choice. You always had a choice, I said, my voice steady. But you chose him, and now you've got to deal with the consequences. No more running, no more pretending. I'm done pretending, too. She looked like she wanted to argue, to yell, to turn it all back on me. But she didn't. Instead, she just turned away, her back to me, like she couldn't look at me anymore. I didn't feel pity for her. There was no sympathy left in me for a woman who had made her choices and now had to face the fallout. The silence stretched on again, and this time, it was unbearable for her. You're going to tell everyone, aren't you? She finally asked, her voice quieter now, but still tinged with desperation. You're going to ruin my career. Ruin it? I repeated, the word tasting bitter. You did that all on your own. I'm just making sure everyone knows the truth. You didn't think it was going to stay hidden forever, did you? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she turned back to face me, eyes hardening. What do you want from me, Hugo? You think this is going to make you feel better? This is what you wanted all along. I didn't flinch. I didn't want anything from you. This was never about me feeling better. This is about you getting what you deserve. For everything you've done. For everything you thought you could get away with. She stepped back, her hand on the counter like she was holding herself up. You're just like them, she said bitterly. You're just like all those men who think they can control everything. You think you're better than me, but you're not. I met her gaze squarely. No, I'm not better, but I am stronger. And right now, that's all that matters. She didn't argue after that. She didn't have anything left to say. She was defeated and she knew it. I didn't need to keep talking. There was nothing left to prove. The next few days were a blur. She packed up her things quickly, avoiding my eyes whenever she had to cross paths with me. I didn't stop her. I didn't care anymore. I'd gotten what I needed. She was going to face the fallout from the affair. She was going to lose everything she thought she had. And I was going to move on. I'd already put the plan in motion. Now I just had to sit back and watch it unfold. Tom stopped by a couple of times, but I didn't feel like talking much. He could see it in my face, the calm that had settled over me. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't anything, really. I was just done. It was over. Everything all right, Hugo? He asked one afternoon as he saw me out in the yard, cleaning up some of the old leaves. I didn't look up at him right away. It's fine, I said flatly. Just fine. You sure? I know you've been through a lot. If you need to talk. I shook my head. No, Tom. I'm good. I'm just fine. He didn't push it. He never did. He just gave me that kind look, the kind that said he knew more than he let on. But it didn't matter. I wasn't looking for sympathy. I wasn't looking for anything. I just wanted to make sure I'd put the past behind me for good. The fallout was quick. The office started buzzing the next morning when Deanna's affair became public. Her colleagues, the ones who had once looked at her like she was untouchable, started to whisper behind her back. I knew it wouldn't take long for the truth to spread. Her business connections started to distance themselves, the emails stopped, the calls went unanswered. Her carefully constructed life began to fall apart in front of her. I didn't bother to watch. I had nothing left to say to her. I didn't care anymore. She had her own mess to clean up and it wasn't my problem. My only concern now was making sure I didn't lose myself in her wreckage. It didn't take long for things to settle. Deanna didn't drag her feet when it came to leaving. She packed up her things quickly and moved out, but not without trying to make one last attempt at something resembling a conversation. It was a week after the flyers had gone up when she showed up at the door. I was sitting on the porch, trying to keep myself busy with an old project I'd been putting off, fixing the steps that had been creaking for months. When I saw her pull up, I didn't get up. I didn't feel like it. She stepped out of the car slowly, like she didn't know whether to come up or turn around and leave. "Hugo," she said, her voice softer than I expected. "We need to talk." I wiped my hands on the rag in my pocket, still not looking at her. "Talk about what?" I didn't expect things to go this far," she said, her eyes shifting like she was trying to make sense of what had happened. "But I'm trying to fix things. I'm trying to make it right." "Right?" I said, finally meeting her gaze. "What's there to fix? You already made your choices. It's too late for all that." She took a step closer, but I didn't move. "Please, Hugo. I didn't mean to hurt you. I was just lost. I didn't know what I was doing." "Spare me," I said. "You didn't get lost. You made a choice. A damn good one, too. But that's your problem now. Not mine." She looked like she was about to say something else, but then she stopped herself. She didn't have the words anymore. It was over and we both knew it. "I just wanted to apologize for everything," she said, sounding more defeated than anything else. "I didn't think it would end up like this." I stood up, brushing the dust off my hands. "You've been making excuses for months, Deanna. You had your shot at fixing things. I'm not doing this with you." She looked like she wanted to argue, but she didn't. She just stood there for a long minute, maybe hoping I'd soften. But I wasn't going to. Not this time. I'd spent too long trying to fix things that weren't mine to fix anymore. "I'm leaving," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I just want you to know I didn't mean for any of this to happen." I didn't reply. She didn't need to hear it from me. I wasn't going to make this easier for her. Not when she'd taken everything and turned it into something I couldn't even recognize. She turned to leave, her shoulders slumped, and I just watched her go. I didn't feel anything about it. I didn't feel relief or anger. I just felt like the door had finally closed and I wasn't going to open it again. Days passed. The house felt different. Quieter. I found myself getting used to it. There was a peace in the silence. The kind of peace you don't expect when everything falls apart, but it was there, nonetheless. I wasn't looking for distractions. I wasn't looking for excuses to fill the empty space. I just focused on what was next. Tom dropped by a few times to check in, but I kept things short. He could tell things had changed, but he didn't ask questions. He just nodded, offered some quiet advice here and there, and then left me to my thoughts. "You know, Hugo," he said one afternoon, sitting on the porch with me while I worked on the railing, "it's not too late to put things back together. The vets group still wants you back. They've been asking." I didn't answer right away. The thought of going back to the group had crossed my mind, but I wasn't sure I was ready to face it. "I don't know," I said, trying to sound indifferent. "Maybe I'll think about it." Tom didn't push. He knew when to let things go, and I appreciated that. "All right," he said, standing up to leave. "But I think you'd do well there. Might give you something else to focus on. Something to rebuild." "Maybe," I said, watching him walk away. But I didn't know if I was ready for that. Rebuilding didn't sound like the right word. I was done with rebuilding. What I needed now was a fresh start. I didn't need anyone telling me what to do or how to do it. I just needed to take the next step, whatever that was. A few days later, I got an unexpected call. My boss from the construction company I worked for had reached out. I hadn't expected to hear from him, not after everything that had happened with Deanna. But he wanted to meet up. I didn't hesitate. I knew what this was about. I'd been a solid worker, reliable, tough as nails. He wasn't calling to talk about personal stuff. He was calling because he had a job for me. Promotion. When I walked into his office that afternoon, I wasn't expecting much. But when he told me what he had in mind, I could feel something shift inside me. It wasn't the job itself that mattered, it was the recognition, the respect. I'd earned that, and now it was mine. "We've got a project coming up," he said, tapping a file on his desk. "It's yours if you want it. Big team, big responsibility. We could use someone who knows how to handle things under pressure." I nodded, knowing this was the opportunity I'd been waiting for. "I'm in," I said, no hesitation. "When do we start?" He smiled. "Good. I knew you'd say that. Let's get to work." As I left his office that day, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. Real purpose. It wasn't about the affair or Deanna, or the mess I'd left behind. It was about moving forward, taking control and not looking back. For the first time in months, I felt like I was finally in the right place. The news about Deanna's affair spread fast. The whispers at the company started once her name got dragged through the mud. But I didn't pay attention to any of it. Her world was crumbling. But mine was just beginning. I didn't have to explain myself to anyone. My reputation stood on its own now. Tom dropped by again, a week later, as I was sitting on the porch. "So," he said with a small grin, "heard you got a promotion. Good for you, Hugo." "Thanks," I said, leaning back in the chair. "It's a start." He didn't say anything else, just smiled and walked back to his house. He didn't need to. He knew exactly what I meant. A start. That's all I needed. The weeks that followed weren't filled with the dramatic fallout I'd expected. Deanna did her best to salvage what was left of her dignity, but there wasn't much to work with. Her friends, the ones who had always praised her like she was some sort of saint, began to distance themselves. Word spread fast about the affair, about the betrayal. People started looking at her differently, and I didn't have to do anything to make that happen. I'd already given them the truth. I didn't need to watch it unfold any longer. I focused on what mattered. The promotion. The work. I threw myself into it, and soon, things started falling into place. The job was tougher than I expected, but that didn't bother me. It was exactly what I needed. A challenge. Something to keep my mind sharp, to keep me from thinking about the past. It wasn't easy, nothing worthwhile ever is, but I didn't shy away from it. I met deadlines, led the team, and made sure we delivered. Every morning, I woke up with purpose, and every evening, I went to bed knowing I had earned the day. The first time I had to confront a problem at the job, I didn't hesitate. A subcontractor was late, and the project was on the line. I didn't waste time with polite talk. I went straight to the point. "Get it together or I'll find someone who will." I told him, my voice as steady as ever. He didn't argue. He just nodded and got to work. That's how it worked now. I didn't have room for anything else. In the meantime, Deanna's calls started to trickle in. First, I ignored them. Then they became more persistent, more desperate. One day, I decided to answer. "What do you want, Deanna?" I asked, my voice flat. I need to talk," she said. Her voice wasn't what it used to be. There was no confidence, no control in it. It was broken. "Talk about what?" I asked. "What's left to talk about?" "I'm sorry," she said. And there was no edge to it, no manipulation in her tone. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. You have to know that." "You did exactly what you meant to do," I replied without missing a beat. Now, there's nothing left to say. I heard her take a sharp breath, but I didn't wait for her to find more words. "You're not going to fix this, Deanna. There's no magic apology that's going to undo what's happened. You've got to live with it now." There was silence on the other end. I waited a few more seconds before I hung up. I didn't need to hear any more. She wasn't looking for closure. She was looking for a way to save face. But I wasn't the one who needed saving. The weeks turned into months, and my life kept moving forward. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I was building something new, something that had nothing to do with her or her lies. I took on new projects, met new people, and let the past fade into the background where it belonged. I wasn't going to let it define me. The promotion came with more responsibility, and with it came new challenges. I handled them the same way I always had, head-on. No room for hesitation, no room for self-doubt. I wasn't that man anymore. The man who second-guessed himself, who tried to fix things that were beyond repair. That man was gone. And in his place was someone stronger, someone more determined. Then, one afternoon, I got a call from my old unit. The veterans group had been reaching out to me again. They wanted me to speak at an event they were hosting, a ceremony for veterans in the community. They needed someone who had been through the grind, someone who could tell it like it was. I didn't hesitate this time. I said yes without thinking. I wasn't sure what I was walking into, but I knew it was the right thing to do. It wasn't about Deanna or the mess I'd left behind. It was about something bigger. It was about giving something back to the people who had been there when I needed them. When I showed up at the event, I could see the respect in their eyes. I wasn't just some guy off the street. I was one of them. The work I'd done, the sacrifices I'd made, they didn't go unnoticed. I took the stage, looked out at the crowd of veterans, and I didn't feel nervous or uncertain. I just felt steady. Strong. I don't have any fancy words for you, I said to the crowd, my voice clear. But I'll tell you this. Life doesn't give you second chances. It doesn't wait for you to figure it out. You take it one step at a time, and when you get knocked down, you get back up. That's all any of us can do. The crowd was quiet for a moment, then a few nods, a few grunts of agreement. I didn't need applause. I didn't need anything from them. But I could feel the respect in the room, and it was enough. After the event, I stayed for a while, talking to a few of the guys. They didn't ask about Deanna. They didn't need to. They knew the score. We didn't need to talk about the past. We just needed to be there for each other, for the people who understood what it meant to fight, to sacrifice, and to keep going no matter what. By the time I left, the sun was setting. The sky was darkening, but I didn't feel tired. I felt like I was exactly where I needed to be. I'd made it through the worst of it, and now I was standing on the other side. There was a quiet strength in that. A peace that came from knowing I'd done the right thing, from knowing I'd survived. I wasn't looking for revenge anymore. I wasn't looking for anything from Deanna. She had her own path to follow now, and I had mine. All I needed to do was keep walking it. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could finally breathe again. A few months went by, and things started to fall into place. The work kept piling up, the projects kept getting done, and I kept moving forward. I didn't look back, not even when Deanna called again, this time trying a different angle. She left a voicemail. I didn't bother listening to it. I knew exactly what it was about. She was trying to make me feel something, trying to get me to soften. But I wasn't interested anymore. One morning, I got a call from the same number again. I let it ring for a few seconds before I picked up. Hugo? Her voice came through, hesitant. What is it, Deanna? I didn't care about the niceties anymore. My patience had run out a long time ago. I don't know what to say. I just wanted to. Stop right there, I cut her off, my voice calm but firm. You had your shot. It's over. Don't call me again. She didn't respond. I didn't expect her to. The silence that followed felt final, like the end of a chapter I'd already closed. I didn't even feel anger anymore. It was just done. I moved on with my life. I stayed busy, kept my head down, and focused on the work that mattered. My reputation at the company was solid, my team respected me, and I was getting recognized for the work I was doing. It wasn't the flashiest job, but it was mine. I'd earned it. And that was enough. Then, out of nowhere, a surprise hit me. I got an email from a lawyer. It was from Deanna's lawyer, claiming she was trying to work out some kind of settlement. A part of me almost laughed at it. After everything, she thought she could just come back and fix it with paperwork? That's how much she underestimated me. I read through it, but it didn't take long to figure out where things stood. She was looking to settle some financial stuff, but there was something else in the email that caught my eye. There was a mention of an investigation into her, one she hadn't told me about. I wasn't sure if it was something she was trying to hide, but as I looked through the details, it clicked. There were some allegations about embezzlement tied to her business dealings, and now they were asking for my testimony. They wanted me to come forward as a witness. I could feel the weight of it. She was getting dragged deeper into her own mess, and I had nothing to do with it anymore. But there was a quiet satisfaction in it, knowing that her empire of lies was crumbling. It wasn't something I'd set in motion, but it was inevitable. She wasn't going to get away with it. Not this time. I knew this wasn't going to be easy. If the investigation picked up, it would get ugly, and I might have to get involved in ways I hadn't expected. But I didn't care. She had brought this on herself. I'd paid my dues, walked through the fire, and came out clean. It was her turn to face the consequences of her actions. I called the lawyer back. I didn't need to speak to Deanna directly. I didn't need her to beg for my forgiveness or anything else. I just made sure they knew I'd cooperate if I needed to. It wasn't personal. It was just business. The rest of the year went by fast. I kept my head down, worked hard, and stayed out of drama. Every now and then, I'd hear about Deanna in the news, some snippet about her facing new legal challenges, losing clients, losing respect. It didn't matter to me anymore. The woman I once knew was long gone. As for me, I was building something new. I wasn't the same man I was when I first found out about her affair. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need closure. I had all that in the strength I'd found on my own. I'd taken control of my life and left her and everything she represented behind. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was truly free. I went to bed that night with a sense of peace I hadn't felt in ages. It was quiet, the kind of silence that comes when you finally left the past where it belongs. I had nothing to regret, nothing to fix. I'd done it all on my terms. And it felt damn good.